I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, April 16th, 2018 to order. Charlie, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Charlie. Public forum at the beginning of the meeting is limited to 3 minutes on any agenda item on the current agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board in public forum? Hearing none, let's move on to item 3.1, and that's approved minutes. Is there a motion to approve the April 2nd, 2018 regular meeting minutes?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Comments or questions? Hearing none. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Recusals? Hearing none. Motion carries. Move on to 3.2, and that is to approve the minutes of the April 11th, 2018 special meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any comments, questions, additions, etc.? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. At this point, I would like to add a couple of items to the agenda. It's already in your board pack, but I think we have to do it officially. Item 9 is discuss and take possible action on a request from Kids Hugs to place a sign on the green. Is there a motion?
So
to add
moved.
number
Second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none. We have one other, and let's see, where did we put it on the, hold on. There it is. It is now number 6 here. Add to agenda, consider and take possible action on resolution authorizing the first selectman to enter into and amend contractual instruments necessary to execute the Neighborhood Facilities Program grant with the Department of Social Services of the State of Connecticut for the VFW. Call the question.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, recusals. It's so added. Item 4, received presentation from Verizon regarding the small cell installation near the Guilford Green. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to tee this up a little bit. We've had some discussions over, I think, the past 3 or 4 months regarding Verizon's interest in increasing their cell coverage, particularly for data services in the greater downtown area. We had some discussions related to the most appropriate placement of additional equipment, and we're at the point now where Verizon is fairly confident that the best and only placement is as will be described to us shortly. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Mr. Hoy, and thank you all for making this time available for us. My name is Richard Smith. I'm a member of the firm of Robinson and Cole. And as you can see, Sean Conway was to be here, and I don't know if he ran into trouble with the weather. He's coming from Massachusetts, so he might show up late. And we'll see if that's the case. But what I wanted to do this morning is just, without taking up too much of your time, briefly outline the project, and before that, sort of set the stage with respect to the small cell concept. These are newer projects. We're all very familiar with the traditional tower installations for cell systems. They're the monopole or lattice pole towers that we all know from years ago, started along the highways where everyone had a phone in their car or a bag phone or something huge and bulky just so we could try to make a phone call. But what we're seeing today, as most folks would know, is it's a transition from what we used to call those macro antenna installations, which are the large monopoles, which essentially had, if you think of their service area as a mushroom cap, it would be a mushroom cap where the distance covered would be measured in miles. What we're talking about today are small cell antenna installations where the coverage distance typically runs between 500 and 1,500 feet with that small mushroom cap. depending on whether there are radio signal interferences, obstructions that attenuate the signal. And what the small cells are doing is addressing how we've changed our use of our mobile devices. What used to be just our phone communication system is now essentially our portable computer. It's for emails and texts and internet connections. We're all downloading and streaming various videos or larger documents all to our handheld device as opposed to what we used to do on the desktop PC. And so what we see is this increasing demand where we've gone from simple voice transmissions to data-heavy videos and documents and other types of communications that essentially find that we're running into choke points with all the services that are demanded now being focused on the larger towers. It gets to the point where they can't handle that capacity without affecting the signal performance for the users. So what Verizon does is when they see those increases in demand in various system elements, they first try to improve the capabilities of the large tower sites. They add new antenna systems, additional channels, things that will offload some of what the existing antenna is servicing by adding more components to those systems. But they get to a point where those are maxed out and they can't get that flow through the system. So the small cell projects are what they turn to next as the next tool to provide the necessary services for customers. And the small cells are as I say, not a large area servicing instrument. It's a focused servicing instrument. And what they essentially do is go to the point of origin of that increased demand. The vast majority of the sites are for increased capacity demand. So we've seen over the last few years that it's the schools, ball fields, our retail centers, even we've seen people transitioning so that the condominium locations and apartment locations are also increased demands because people are getting away from their landline actually. Some folks are relying on their handheld phone all the time. They're not getting a home phone as well. So that's another source of demand. So what happens is the RF engineers are constantly monitoring the existing system to see how it's performing. And they can identify those locations by antenna site where the increase in demand is reaching the limits of the capability of the existing equipment. So, and let me step back. There are some coverage problems that sometimes are addressed by a small cell because a number of people realize that they might live in a location that's got poor performance with the existing system, or there's spots in town where they go through town and they may drop a call. And in some cases, that's because the existing monopole, the large pole systems, have blind spots. They can't reach everything. With the new technology of a small cell, when you have that kind of problem for a location limit with limited connections, you can address that by a small cell installation that captures that local signal or relays that local signal to the user in that location. And that's the other use of the small cell. But the vast majority of these are addressing capacity issues. And so the RF engineers reviewing the system will identify a location where they need additional capability, and then they turn to the Verizon Real Estate Group. And what the Real Estate Group is responsible for is reviewing the available utility pole locations within the target area and determining if there are available poles that can be used for the new installation. And that's primarily a review of the standards established by the pole owners. So we have Eversource, CLMP, we have United Illuminating, and we have Frontier, formerly SNET. Essentially, those are the vast majority of the poles owned by those three. And so Verizon has agreements with the pole owners. They set standards, engineering and technical standards for which poles can be used and which poles cannot be used for the antenna attachments. And so what the real estate folks do is take that request from the RF engineers, review the available poles for what attachments are on those poles already, and determine which poles meet the pole owner criteria for attaching the antenna systems. And then we go through the PURA process. So what the PURA process does is it established what's called the single pole administrator process, which essentially was the PURA approved procedure for anybody seeking attachment permissions, Verizon or other cell phone carriers, or in some cases there are other types of attachments that are going on the poles. They need to apply through the single pole administrator process for permission to attach, and that's done by providing engineering information and drawings and technical information as to what they would like to put on the pole. That's reviewed to identify any equipment conflicts, because there's some separation requirements between lines and antennas and lights and transformers and things of that sort. So that review will determine if the pole meets the criteria as is, if something has to be changed, if lines have to be adjusted on the pole. If a new pole is required, sometimes a new pole is required. Sometimes it's for separation requirements of the pole. Sometimes we actually see that some of the poles are older, and the pole owner process just on its own hasn't gotten to the point of changing that in due course. So sometimes we'll need a new pole. So once we get what's called a make-ready determination from the single pole administrator, that'll tell us whether we need any changes or what changes are needed. And when we get that, that's the point at which we know, okay, technically the pole would be available. So we have to go through the notice and comment process under PURA procedures, where we send the information package to the adjoining property owners. We send a copy of those materials to the host municipality. In this case, Guilford is both an adjoining property owner and a host municipality, so you have both sets of materials there. And then that lays out the procedure where someone can contact us with any questions or advise us that they object. And when that 30-day comment period is closed, then we submit an application to PURA, and we advise PURA if we've heard from anyone, if there are any questions or if there are objections. If there are no objections, then it would go through PURA's consent docket, essentially. It's a procedure without a formal evidentiary hearing. If there is an objection, PURA sends a letter to those who have objected, explaining the procedure required to submit a letter and say that you object, and let PURA know if you want a hearing or not. If you want a hearing, then we have a hearing, and then PURA makes a decision after the hearing is closed. So at this point, we have more than 400 approved projects in Connecticut right now. We continue with additional new applications, and we follow the procedure I just described. So here's the example search area map for the Guilford project. It's a little bright, but you should be able to see the polygon, the red line. As you might suspect, being most familiar with the area, the target area is the southwestern corner of the green area downtown. This is a capacity site. This is not a location need. It's an increase in demand for service. And retail locations, as we said, are often a driver for that. So this was the target area given to the real estate group that looked at all the available poles that would have served that area. And essentially, so when the real estate folks get that, they look at the poles that would meet the RF requirements, which typically are fairly close to the target area. As I say, these don't have a wide reach. And then the notice would go to the adjoining property owners here. That black dot on the north side of the street, on the green side, is the pole, the target pole. So the town received notice here, and the owners on the opposite side of the street received notice. In this case, there were two, because essentially that pole is sort of right on the property boundary. So we noticed both those owners as well. Now, this is our first small cell project in Guilford. Our first discussions of the program, and just sort of anticipating questions about why are you here, what are you doing, where else could you be. I asked the real estate folks to essentially expand that review area. So instead of just the poles that are sort of in the target area, proximate to the target area at the southwest corner, I asked them to expand the review. So we looked at poles in north, south, east, west directions and the perimeter of the green. Now, the green pin here is the target pole, and all these other poles, as outlined here, are the poles that we additionally reviewed for their current equipment situation and whether they would be available under the pole owner criteria. So, let me, just an example, this is an example pole. I'm not sure exactly which one it is. It's on the southwest area.
Water Street.
Yeah. So this has a fair collection of examples of conflicts. Transformers kick us off a pole. We can't be on a transformer pole under the criteria. Primary means we can't have a top unit with primary electric lines. In this case, it's difficult to see, but there's a brown hard riser here. Hard risers will typically knock us off a pole because it's an equipment conflict. And in this particular case, you see some other type of attachment boxes here, which also present a conflict, as well as this being something of a semi-intersection pole. So this has just almost all the examples of conflicts that you could run into. And so those are the things we look at when we looked at that expanded list of poles. And essentially, we've got conflicts everywhere else. We've got junction poles, transformers. The green itself has many transformer poles on it, on the green. Lots of electric service locations, so those knock us off. We have hard risers, we have equipment cabinets on the poles, and we have some that had those types of issues and or RF blocks. Again, we're not a tower. We don't have a big look-down capability from a high tower, so we're essentially in the 35-foot range or so. And we have a number of multi-story buildings that attenuate signals when we're trying to reach the whole of this target area. So that's why we essentially find ourselves in a situation where we have that one pole at the south end of the green that is in a position where we can serve that target area. And this is a page from the lease exhibit plans that were in the notice that went to the town and the abutters. This is a picture of the pole looking from a south vantage point across the street. This is a schematic with the canister antenna. Canister antenna is roughly a foot in diameter, which is typically 11 or 12-inch pole diameter. And then it's about 3 feet tall on the top of the pole. The RF, the radio equipment, is the larger box down here. I think that says it's about 12 feet above grade. We're about 8 foot something above grade from the lowest attachment, which is the electric switch. So we have a switch, RF radio equipment. We have the lines going back and forth to the antenna from the primary pieces of equipment, and that's on the drawing that's provided.
Can you tell us what is the exact dimension of the RF piece and then the piece at the top?
The RF box, so this RF box is on another sheet of the plans that went to the town and the abutters. So essentially, and the RF box is essentially pole width as well. It doesn't expand out. So going by memory, the RF box is about 11 or 12 inches wide, and I think it may be about 20-something tall.
20 inches tall?
Yeah, or a bit more. The smaller box, yeah, it's probably a bit more, because as I look here, I do see the smaller box, the equipment electric box at the bottom, is 17 high, 8.5 wide, 6.5 deep. So we're talking about probably 12 inches deep from pole to the outside of the box for the RF box, and then we're probably 20.
So you could safely say 1 foot by 2 feet?
Ballpark, 1 foot by 2 foot, yeah. But I'll have some other pictures for you here in a second. Let me just show you this. So what I also asked to be done is to do photo simulations of the proposed installation. So what we have here is the target pole in the middle, and then 4 vantage points. One is across the street. The second is on the green side to the east, green side to the north, green side to the west. And so we have the existing pole in this shot, and I have some handouts of this, so it's easier for you to see, but let's walk through these first. So this is the existing pole. This is a photo simulation of the new pole with the antenna on top. So this is the canister antenna on top. If you look down here, this is a simulation of the RF head, this connector box here, and the bracket, and then this below it is the electric connection. Then some folks that have commented on other projects have preferred that we paint the equipment, the antenna and attachments, what we call essentially a pole color, brown, sort of blends in to the, as much as people can disagree on what blends or doesn't blend. Some people find it preferable to have this sort of pole color as opposed to the standard just sort of
So
gray color.
that's a definite, I mean, that can happen if you wanted to.
Oh, absolutely, sure. And then, so here we have, we're east of the pole, looking to the west, okay? Here's the simulation with the new pole and the antenna on top. You can't really see the attachments because the pole owners have us put the attachment on what we call the down traffic side, opposite side of traffic. So, and then here it is in the pole color painted for the antenna. Here's looking to the south, standing on the green. New pole, they just happened to be doing it at that time of the day. They were shooting into the sun. There's with the pole color, and then this is probably the clearest shot. So the last, looking from the west to the east, existing pole, new pole, and then we have the electric disconnect on the bottom, the RF package above that, and then the antenna on top in standard paint format, and then pole color format.
So are you literally talking about doing this to one pole in the whole town right now?
Yeah, right. Yes, right now. Understanding, I don't want to mislead anyone. I don't know. I don't have any packages requesting additional Guilford site poles. This is the one I have right now, and as I say, these are very focused. 500 to 1,500 foot radius for the service area for these things, and it's driven by that southwestern corner of the green primarily. So that's the pole color installation. This is the best view to show you the equipment side of the pole in this simulation as well, also with that equipment also painted.
Richard, question. I've had the benefit of some earlier conversations, but if you wouldn't mind talking about the RF equipment, the electric equipment related to health concerns,
Oh, sure.
transmission of.
Sure, and as I say, we've had 400 of these projects approved to date through the PURA process. The information packages that go out to everyone basically tell them if they have any questions, call me. So I've handled a lot of calls, and as you would expect, there aren't a lot of people who are in this business, so it's unfamiliar, and it's technology which sometimes can spook people, so they want to know about it. And I've had a lot of conversations to explain that every installation has to comply with the FCC health and safety standards. What that means is that we have to conduct an engineering calculation of the radio energy that's going to be generated by the signal coming out of the antenna, and determine that it complies with the FCC standards. Typically, we're fractions of the standard. The range can vary. It's sometimes 5%, sometimes 30%, but we cannot build one that would exceed the standards. And the standards themselves, as our experts have testified before PURA, are multiples and multiples below anything that would be a detectable potential impact to someone. So the standards are first ratcheted down, and then we're fractions of the standard.
So we're probably more at risk by having this alongside our head than we are of standing near that pole.
I've heard that said by knowledgeable people, and I think that's probably correct. The other, generally the other thing is, related to that is that our phones seek out an available signal through an antenna, and they have variable power. So if they have to go to an antenna that's far away, they use more power. If they go to an antenna that's nearby, they ratchet it down substantially. So it helps for, sometimes folks are concerned about that, and essentially what it does by having more antennas is you need less power.
I also want to talk about total height. You had indicated that that pole is the shortest one in the green, on the green. With the extension of that antenna, will it still be among the shorter, or will it be about the same height as the balance of the poles?
It's probably going to be, just eyeballing this, I think it's going to be closer to the height of some of these other poles. Right now, it seems to be an older pole and shorter pole, and didn't have transformers, obviously. Or electric, electric again comes from the top, so we don't have a service lead from this pole. It's a comms pole, so telephone and other communications are coming off the existing pole, so that's why it didn't presumably need to be taller. But this pole, the existing pole is 29.3 feet above ground level, and it's going to go to 34.0 feet AGL.
If this all goes through, how disruptive or non-disruptive a process is it to replace the pole and reconnect all the wires? And I'm just thinking we're going into a busy time on the green where there's events often, on the green, pedestrian
Right,
events and
right.
official events. And so what's the installation like?
Well, the pole change is done by the pole owners. So I don't know if it's one truck or two truck, but essentially it's the bucket trucks that you see working on poles that will first make the change in the pole. And then the installation engineers for Verizon use a single bucket truck for their attachments, and essentially the vast majority of cases they cone it in one truck and they're done in a day or less than a day, less than a full day. If there are traffic concerns, if it's busy intersection concerns, the geometry's concern for safety, then Verizon will get a local police detail for traffic control if necessary.
Question. Apparently you guys are getting the jump on a very competitive landscape out there. Will we expect to hear from AT&T, Sprint, other folks looking to do something similar in the area? And if so, would that preclude them from using the pole that you're currently on?
Yeah, it's possible. Some of the carriers are looking at this technology as well. You could hear from them. It depends. Again, it depends on their demand needs. If they have substantial customer demand and need some improvement in the equipment in this area, that could be the driver as well for them. You couldn't have multiple provider attachments, as I understand, to this pole, just because there isn't enough equipment room. As I said, everything's driven by equipment conflicts. Well, now you've got the existing issues and the additional Verizon attachments that would be there. And I had several instances where people have testified that you're not going to see another carrier's attachment to the same pole.
You talked a little bit about the public utility regulatory process and where communities or individual property owners could file objections. We did send a letter to you looking to discuss and we reserved the right, I think it was,
Right.
to object. And we entered into some discussions with you folks. And it was at that point that we learned, well, some of the documentation we had from Pura and also from Verizon, as well as Robinson Cole, indicated that aesthetics are not a valid reason or basis for an objection as determined by the Public Utility Regulatory Authority. So one of the concerns we have in this community is the green is clearly one of our most treasured assets in the community. We also have an organization that has, the Green Committee that preserves the historic integrity. So the question that was raised, and I think it's important for people to understand, is aesthetics, the way it looks on the pole, is not a valid basis for objections with the Public Utility Regulatory Authority. Is that true?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. If this is the only pole that's physically suitable for the project, you're lucky you have one, I guess. And what would happen if this pole was not suitable? What does Verizon do where there's no suitable pole?
Well, we've already done the enhancements to the macro sites. The antenna additions or tipping and things they try to do to reach the area with enough capacity. So that wouldn't be available. It's unlikely that you'd choose to try to install a new tower site. It might be possible for an installation on a building if they could hit the target site with an installation on a rooftop type design. But I don't know specifically if that would work or not. But this is the first step for Verizon. They go to available poles under their agreement with the pole owners.
And clearly, engaging with a commercial property owner in town would present cost alternatives that don't exist with using the poles. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's definitely a different discussion on cost between a private property owner and the pole owners who have the agreements that have been reviewed by Pura.
Does Verizon compensate the pole owner?
Yes.
How much?
It's not much. We're talking hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars.
You said you have 400 installations in Connecticut. Is that 400 individual pole installations or 400 town? Well, there aren't 400 towns, so there's 169 towns. So are there any near the South Central area that around here?
Sure. Yeah, we have. Let me see. I'm trying to think of. I'm not sure if we have a nearby, say, Branford or Madison location. I know we have Branford locations, but it's down Stony Creek area. I think I've received a construction notice for that one in Branford. But we could certainly get you an address nearby if you want to visit one and see one.
That might be helpful.
Sure.
And another question. Pura seems to be the overarching decision maker in this. So I'm not saying that the town of Guilford's going to object. I'm just trying to think of possible questions that citizens might have about this. Are they kind of their decision is the final arbiter of things? So even if we had 3,000 objections, that would not matter necessarily?
Yeah, if I understand the question, yeah, it's not a situation where the number of objections or how strenuously someone objects is going to sway Pura. Pura has its criteria, and we wouldn't propose a project that we thought didn't meet the criteria, and that's why we've had a number of approvals we have.
And there is no role for planning and zoning in this type of review?
No, there's no step for local review in addition to Pura. Pura's got exclusive jurisdiction on the pole attachments.
Can I ask, were there complaints from the two other property owners or nothing?
No questions or complaints.
I think the term public necessity and convenience comes into play related to Pura's authority.
So, yeah, similar to Siting Council, it's got a similar type of review process.
It sort of seems similar to the Eversource project that's taking place right now.
Correct. When deemed by the regulatory authorities to have substantial community benefit, local objections are outweighed. So, and we, quite honestly, we went through this process with Richard and the Verizon team, anticipating that there might be some pushback. And it became clear to us that we'd be throwing good money after bad if we were to pursue a legal course of action to object, because it would clearly result in us engaging outside counsel, particularly telecom specific counsel, to pursue objecting and fighting this to no agreeable or reasonable outcome on our part.
And we did consult an outside counsel with expertise in this area.
All right.
Other questions?
Anything else? Thank you very much for your time and
You're very welcome.
presentation.
Thank
And
you for
you
the
have a
time.
copy of the presentation to share with us?
I've got the-
Electronically is fine.
Yeah, let me send you a clean electronic one, and I've also got hard copies for the photo sims, just because they're easier to see.
You got it, thank you.
And I'll get you an example location. I'll send that in an email
Thank
too.
you.
Wonderful.
Okay, very good.
And we'll make this presentation available on our website, the town website. So,
Okay.
thank you very much. Thank you, Richard. And say hello to my friend Joey Lee Miranda when you get
Will.
back.
Okay.
When you get back up to Hartford. Item 5, Finance Director, Mary Jane.
Good morning, is it
Good
still
morning.
morning?
You can pass those over, get those out of the way. Shameless plug. All right, monthly finance report, starting with the revenues?
We start with revenue. You do have a hard copy of a revised one that I sent out, handed out this morning. Some computer issues, we couldn't get it up on board pack before the meeting. So,
Use the microphone, it's right behind your computer. Just move it over.
I didn't want anybody to hear me. Anyway, so overall, when you're looking at our revenues, we are in good shape, mainly because tax collection is bringing in a surplus that is going to be used to cover some other areas that are lagging behind, most of which we've talked about at earlier meetings. So unless you have any specific questions.
Revenues, good?
Good.
Good, we're in good shape, all right. Expenses?
On the expenditure side, also we're in pretty good shape. You know, we're 75% through the year and we're at 74% expended. I just wanted to note that if you look at item 106 insurance, we are currently overdrawn on that account, and it's because we have not transferred funds in from outside sources. The library, waste transfer station, and the police will be reimbursing that account for expenses that the town has already sent out. So,
Public Works, overtime?
Public Works overtime, I'm estimating that Public Works will be approximately $60,000 overdrawn at the end of the year, based on where we currently are. It's hard to judge how much of the current encumbrances will not be needed, but on my initial review, that's where we stand at this point.
Yeah, just for those in the viewing audience, overtime, which is traditionally used when we have snowstorms, or any kind of storms, hurricanes, etc. We are currently at 143% of budget. We had $84,000 budgeted for overtime, and we've currently spent 120,000, almost 121,000. So we're 40% over on that number. So-
Right, and I'd just like to add that the storms don't only affect Public Works. Over time, it affects the police,
Police.
the fire. You'll see natural resources budget is.
Town properties.
Natural resources has a huge amount of trees that they're dealing with. So a lot of the budgets are affected by the storms, not just Public Works.
Similarly, Park and Rec as well is already
Yeah,
over.
right.
Same thing.
Yes,
Same thing. So-
yeah.
Okay.
They do work during the storms.
All right. Anything further on expenses? No. Okay. Anything on warrants that you saw of any interest?
I did have one question, if
Certainly.
I could. I know it's on page 37. Let me try to get there. The payment for $15,000 to Durham Middlefield Interlocal for work at Town Brush Site. What are?
It's their stomach
Apologize.
grinder, I bet.
Yes.
So that's- Okay, so we don't have that equipment.
Right.
No,
The
it's used.
Durham and Middlefield Transfer Station have a grinder that they supplement the expense by doing things for other towns, and
Okay.
we are one of them here.
All right, I apologize for the dumb question.
Nope,
but
that's okay.
Oh, no.
They bring
No.
that down to us, or do we?
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
So is that a typical, every year we're
Correct.
spending that? It wouldn't, is that something that would make sense for us to have, or is, I don't know.
It was a
Sounds
very
like a
expensive
lot.
purchase, I can tell you. I was there when we bought it.
Mhm.
So they are hoping that the town of Guilford continues. They do budget for that revenue each year on that assumption, so.
But your point's good. What's the cost benefit analysis?
Yeah.
of
How many
a
years
purchase?
would
How
it
many
take
years it take to pay it
to
off?
pay for
right?
itself?
I mean, at some
More-
point, maybe when it has to be replaced, or with some other towns do a regionalized thing, but it's not a type of equipment that we would use on a regular basis. It's easily shared on a semi-monthly basis.
Right,
Sure,
and
yeah.
that's why during the
Sharing
Middlefield,
spend.
they're able to share it. It's not like buying a sweeper and everybody needs a sweeper at the same time.
Right.
This is something that can be used, anytime throughout the year. So it's a better regional use of a piece of equipment.
As long as it's better for Guilford. It
Correct.
is.
As long,
Yeah.
yes, yep.
Anything else? Medical? We're still projecting over $700,000 surplus on the medical line item.
On the expenditure side, yeah,
Yeah.
we are up $100,000 in claims this year, this month over last. So we are seeing that number increase. But even with that, we are still showing, a $4 million anticipated balance at the end of the year.
And the stop loss, I'm sure you'll get more questions this evening at the Board of Finance meeting related to the stop loss premium.
It is what it is right now.
We're
It
having a
do-
good year.
So far we are. It steadily grows, as you can see, as it goes throughout the year. So, we only need another $855,000 worth. It's, one claim could do that or more. So,
Yes, sir, you're right.
and again, as we've talked,
And we're not
it
hoping
is-
for that. That's not.
We're
the-
not
the-
hoping
believe-
for that. But we do budget over, a rolling average of where we are, one year up
Does
or
not-
down.
Does not a trend make.
Correct. Exactly right.
Good, good. All right. Anything else?
Not on those?
We're good. Okay, want to talk a little bit about the, discuss and take possible action on negotiated salary transfers for fiscal year 2017, 2018?
Yes, over this fiscal year, we have settled our labor contracts with the Guilford Supervisors Association and the Teamsters, as well as the Guilford Employee Association. As such, I am seeking a transfer from reserve for personnel, a total of $241,382 to cover the increases in the budget lines. Keep in mind that specifically the GEA went 2 years, so we're looking at a 2-year increase this year because we budget flat. So one of the items on your board pack is my memo that just says what I just said, and the other one specifically lists the particular line items that are affected by these changes. It's not often that we have 3 union contracts coming to you at one time, so the number is a little bit higher than normal. We do have $220,000 budgeted in this year, which we will use up, and then also pull in another just shy of $21,000 that we had put aside last year for the same purpose, but it went into fund balance because the GEA was not completed last year, so that money went into the fund balance.
All right, is there a motion to transfer $241,382 into the various line items as described in our memo, to come from the 2 reserved for personnel line items, one out of the current budget and the second out of the fund balance, in a similar amount, $241,382. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments, questions, et cetera?
Did you want to say that something, motion should also recommend to Board of Finance?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, let's add
So
it.
that's part of the motion.
Right.
Yes, all the transfers will include that.
All right, so that motion's been amended and seconded? Good. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, recusals? Hearing none. Good. All right, item 4. Discuss and take possible action to establish a new line item in the general fund balance committed to technology and to transfer $100,000 into it from the assigned reserve for personnel. Just by a little way of background, Mary Jane and I have been working on this, and this is something that we've talked about at this board for a couple of months at this point. With the this administration's focus on technology and maximizing the efficiencies that technology has at the offering for us, we want to take this $100,000 that was originally earmarked for personnel when we were talking about combining the IT organizations between the Board of Education and the town, which has never materialized. But we'd like to move this into a repository where we can do a series of studies, evaluations, or engagements to identify the technology gaps that we have. In particular, we are looking, and you'll see, the next item on the agenda is the specific use of some of those funds. But this creates a way for us to fund what we need to do, what we need to study, and to develop recommendations. So, Mary Jane?
Yeah, I just want to add that it's a way to commit that money to technology. Currently, it's in reserve for personnel,
Personnel for
which could really be
technology.
used for anything, although on paper, we have it set aside for technology, but reserve for personnel is not
Nice way to
specific.
track it, too.
Right.
Correct.
You know, we know
We just
what
want to
we've
make sure
done
we
there.
hold that for technology.
How can we see all of these earmarks and set-asides and assignments and things like that? Can we have a
Page-
schedule?
Page
50
52
of the audit.
of your audit, I
Okay,
think.
all right, thank you.
I think it's 52 around there somewhere.
So, all right, thanks.
You know the answer to that, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I did not know the answer to that. So,
Good.
It's,
all right.
I can,
So-
it's rounding about that, the page number.
So if we can revisit this
Yes.
later, but if we
Right.
wanted to actually see where out of the total, here's 100 for this purpose. well,
Absolutely,
it's
you'll see,
in-
you'll see it in there.
Okay, then
Currently,
you can walk me through it later.
I believe there's 210,000 in reserve for personnel, you'll see in that audit, some of which we're using today, 100,000 which will, if with Board of Finance approval, will be in a new committed to technology line, and then the balance will remain in reserve and personnel.
All right.
To use for future contracts. We'll get the right page.
Okay, all right, no, that's fine.
All right, we comfortable with this? All right, and just as a a practical matter, the Board of Finance will have to approve that as well, establishing the new line item as well as transferring the 100,000. So, is there a motion to establish the new account and transfer $100,000 from reserve for personnel into that account, and recommend to the Board of Finance that they do the same?
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, motion carries. Item 5, consider and take possible action to waive bidding on land use technology efficiency assessment proposal and authorize the first selectman to sign the agreement contingent upon funding authorization by the Board of Finance. Apropos of the conversation we just had, we've engaged Mary Jane, myself, have engaged, and then Mike Ailes, the chairman of the Board of Finance, have actively engaged Bloom Shapiro. They've provided us with a proposal to study the technology efficiency assessment for the various land use departments, which will include process as well as appropriate use of technologies. And this is again designed to touch all areas that I think you have all the you have all the departments, including assessor and tax collector,
yeah,
health
fire
department,
marshal.
planning. Exactly.
Yeah, it's really
And
very
just to
broad.
add that it will include a fraud risk assessment,
Exactly.
which was specifically spelled out to us in our management letter for the past 2 years
In the audit.
in our audit. So this is a way for us to address that as well.
Right. And the authorization is, I think, a little over $36,000, if you see it on the page. So, any further questions?
I do
John?
have one. It's about waiving the bidding process.
Right.
Why, here we have a professional consultant, happens to be our auditor, so they have a lot of familiarity, obviously, they're hitting the ground running.
Yep.
But other than that, how do we know that they're the right firm to do this for us?
I think you just said, your explanation is what leads me to believe they're the right firm. Their familiarity with us, with our organization, and it's not unusual when we are comfortable with a incumbent vendor to utilize their services through a bid waiver.
We've been using them for a fairly long time,
I'd say
so,
probably 15 years.
yeah.
Yeah.
Over that, it's probably closer to 20 at this point.
Okay.
Anything further? Is there a motion to waive the bidding on the land use technology efficiency assessment proposal and authorize the first selectman to sign the agreement contingent upon funding authorization by the Board of Finance?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any further questions or comments? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Recusals? Hearing none. Motion carries. All right, consider and take possible action on resolution authorizing the first selectman to enter into and amend contractual instruments necessary to execute the Neighborhood Facilities Program grant with the Department of Social Services of the State of Connecticut for the VFW. Mary Jane, just give us a little overview, background,
Probably.
why we're doing this?
Probably well aware, the VFW is being reconstructed and currently is expected to be complete by the end of this fiscal year, which is the current expiration date of our grant. We are seeking a 3-month extension just to be sure we have all of our punch list items complete and to allow us time to finalize all the paperwork that will go into it. We are really just a pass-through contractor for this project, although I do manage the grant paperwork and file all of the forms. The reason we're coming to you today is the original resolution specifically listed Joseph Mazza in the resolution. Therefore, Matt was not authorized, although he is the first selectman, not authorized to sign the documentation. So if you look on the attachment is the form that the town clerk will need to sign, and the part that I have highlighted just specifically refers to Matt at this point, so that we can get that going. We will be filing the extension this afternoon, and moving forward. The project is going very well, very smoothly. Working with the VFW has been good experience with me since I got here, so, you know, I don't foresee any issues finalizing all the grant.
Motion?
I'm moving.
Probably more than you needed to know, right?
And a second, and a
Sue
second.
second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Mary Jane.
Okay, thanks.
Item 6, Steve, facilities. Come on in. Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Good, and you?
Well, good. We had 2 items. The first 6.1 is consider and take possible action on the award of rebid for the community center roof replacement.
We had a special standing building committee last Thursday. They posed some more questions in the end that the architect could not answer.
Okay.
So with those questions, we've posed them back to the architect to get back in touch with the 2 low bidders. I'm hoping to have answers tomorrow,
Okay.
which we can have a special meeting with the standing building committee tomorrow night. And I'm hoping to get a special meeting from the Board of Selectmen for maybe later on in the week to get that approved so we can get going on the roof.
Okay, understood.
So that's where it is at this point.
All right, we'll check calendars later. Thank you, Steve.
Can you give us an example of the type of questions that they couldn't answer?
He was getting into OSHA ratings and whatnot, which we've never had before, but there's new people on the board asking different questions.
Okay. So it wasn't fundamental about,
The contractor.
Yes.
Why is it a rebid? I can't remember the situation.
We rebid before, and the standing building committee didn't like the way it was bid. There was, we asked certain amounts to replace sheathing and stuff, and there's such a wide variety or a wide variance that they wanted us to take out certain language and stuff and rebid it. And by the time it was bid, it was later on in the spring to where a lot of the roofing contractors were already booked up, so the prices seemed to be higher, so I thought
You
we'd
only
make
had
out
2 bids,
better.
right? You had 2 bids for the original.
The original.
and
Right,
this time you
right, we had more.
6.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
correct. Welcome.
All right, 6.2, discuss and take possible action on award of bid number 10 dash 1718 Town Hall elevator and fire alarm upgrades.
Town went out for bids. We had 4 responses. We interviewed the 2 low bidders. Went in front of standing building committee, got their approval for giving it to Augustine Builders for the amount of $98,000. So SBC approval was on April 12th last week. So I am here asking for your guys' acceptance to enter into a contract with Augustine Builders for the $98,000.
And your consultant also recommended.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, we do that at the standing building committee.
thank you. All right, is there a motion?
So moved?
second?
We'll get Charlie out of the mix here. Any further questions or discussion? This is a project that's been in the works for
Yeah.
some time.
Yes, and they were separate and we combined them,
Right.
hopefully for ease.
And this was funding out of a bond authorization from town hall upgrades from a few years ago?
I don't remember whether it was bond or capital,
think it
to be
is.
quite honest.
All right. Nonetheless, okay, call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals? Good, motion carries. Thank you, Steve.
Very good, thank you.
Item 7, discussion regarding transportation alternative funds and authorize the first selectman to request of South Central Regional Council of Governments repurposing of funds for an alternate project. As some of you may recall, we received at the recommendation of South Central Council of Regional Governments a federal transportation alternative grant, which was originally contemplated for use on the Nut Plains Pathway. Given that the Nut Plains Pathway has not proceeded based on significant public input, as well as the apparent complete halt that the state has on transportation projects, the $4 billion that the governor talked about, including the road widening project for Nut Plains that we had anticipated receiving funding from the LOTSIP program. We are also getting some pressure from the state, as well as from well, predominantly the state, in regards to our intentions with that transportation alternative money. In working with Steve Dudley, the transportation coordinator for South Central Council of Regional Governments, we have approached the SCROG, and informally they have given us the green light to repurpose those funds. What that means is, because they're the authorizing body on the distribution of funds through the regional planning organization, the COG, they would need to approve it. So we have preliminary indication that they would approve repurposing those funds. And in particular, I would like to recommend to COG that we take a look at the Route 77 or Church Street corridor between Adams Middle School and the Guilford Racquet Club and the Shoreline Arts Alliance, to build some kind of, to first study and potentially build some kind of pathway sidewalk between those various cultures of centers of culture rather. We have students walking throughout the school year up through that I-95 intersection to get to the Racquet Club, to get to the various arts programs. In addition, the public safety complexes are right there, including those basketball courts, which seem to be in use most times when I drive by. So what I would like to do is to authorize you to formally request of the South Central Council of Regional Governments consideration of moving the transportation alternative funds. The amount is about $660,000, which would easily cover studies and potential solutions.
Okay. And it could go to Hubbard Road, which cuts across over the Long Hill.
Very possibly, very possibly.
Which is not that much.
Just one clarification, the connection up to the public safety complex and the tennis racket club, and you said Shoreline Arts Alliance, but you actually mean the Guilford Arts Center.
Guilford Arts Center, that's right. Yeah.
So just saying that. So
Thank you for the clarification.
That's all right.
Guilford Arts Center.
Because their office is in Madison.
Madison,
so-
yeah, that'd be a big pathway,
You know.
wouldn't it? Have to get on 95.
Yeah.
So,
And that makes all the sense in the world to me, but in light of the next item on the agenda, which is the task force, would this be a request for funding that would then become part of the task force's charge, or is this a standalone item?
this is a standalone item, and it seems to be, contrary to the design of the next item. However, we have timelines on the expiration of these funds that will not allow for the full process on the next line item agenda to take place. And interestingly enough, there were no, remember we received the 5 petitions for
Yes.
sidewalks? This
No.
was one area that was not contemplated.
No, but it was discussed at that meeting,
Yeah,
which was held right there in the
Exactly.
area. that's-
Exactly.
There's no reason why the task force couldn't weigh in on the planning side of this.
They certainly
Or
could.
have
They
the, have
certainly
the
could.
hearings go through there, that type of thing.
Exactly. They could become part and parcel, but this is something
This is
that-
assigning or reassigning funds.
funds, right,
Yeah.
right.
Which could be reassigned to something else, but we're on a timeline.
We're on a
so-
timeline, so they need to,
What is the timeline?
on this.
Yes.
Actually, we're about a month overdue on
The project,
when we were supposed to have started this project.
Uh-huh.
The Nut Plains Pathway Project.
Okay. I mean, it would be
And-
my preference to have it feed into the task force, but it doesn't
Right.
sound like that makes any sense for the benefit of the town.
It
to
doesn't.
do that,
We can
use it.
we can certainly make it part of the study.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's also some, the police department worked with the state of Connecticut in identifying challenging and dangerous intersections throughout the community. This was a federal program that they did about a year ago. And this intersection was identified as a problematic area and probably our most dangerous intersection, particularly for pedestrians. So, but your point is well taken. And in the perfect world, it would be wonderful to have this rolled into the program. This is going to be something we're going to start on independently, but could get rolled into it
Okay.
at some point.
Good.
We good with that? Okay, so is there a motion to authorize me to ask Scroggs formal permission to repurpose the TA money?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 8, and again, perfect lead-in, Susan. Discussion of Safe Streets Mobility Task Force and authorize the first selectman to establish committee and to make appointments as necessary. As we've talked about on numerous occasions at this board, this task force is designed to look at several things. One is a relook at the transportation plan of 2002 with an idea for repurposing and reprioritizing what was identified as opportunities for improved pedestrian safety, walkways, pathways, as well as incorporating a variety of traffic calming and traffic shaping measures, including speed limits and road widening, etc., to enhance pedestrian safety throughout the community. So, and I will be bringing those, well, I have about close to 15 folks who have self-identified for that committee. I have 2 folks who have indicated a willingness to potentially chair it.
What do you think the ultimate number on that committee will be? Because you don't want
It's
to
a
get
challenge.
Yeah,
That's a challenge. I was hoping for, an odd number, just to break ties. But I was looking for somewhere around 11 to 13, because I think there's a possibility of several task force that could come out of this.
or committee work, because you
yeah.
don't want the task force to be too big.
Yeah.
That they just, it's harder to accomplish things
Right.
sometimes, but you don't want to lose the input of people that are interested and want to volunteer, so
Right.
maybe it can be expanded into subcommittees
Committees,
of
exactly.
traffic,
Right.
sidewalks,
That's
whatever
exactly,
else,
that's
yeah.
why I thought we needed a greater number, because we're gonna be stretching some of these folks pretty thin if they have to sit on 2 or 3 different subcommittees. And one of the other things, and quite honestly, the reason for it being as large as it may be is this community was fractured over the past couple of years, with neighborhoods pitting, issues pitting neighborhoods against each other, and I want full representation of the various interest groups who have voiced their concerns and their opinions about the various projects, whether it's the Nut Plains, whether it's the Shoreline Greenway Trail, or whether it's the sidewalk petitioners. So I want voices from all parts of the community related to those positions. In addition, there's some talent, some folks in this community who have some experience on a national basis with these kind of projects, and I'd like to be able to tap into all of those resources. We will also make available staff resources, police department, fire department, town planner, engineering, health department. All of them have a consideration on this as well. So they'll be more considered staff. And one of the things that we're going to take a look at, so we may be coming back for some funding for this, because at some point we'll probably be looking at either a facilitator or an outside consultant to do some of the study
Do
work.
some strategic stuff.
The strategic stuff. So I've talked about this at other meetings, where I would eventually like to allocate some funds from our unassigned fund balance. Mary Jane and I have talked about this with you, I think, in the past, but at this point, I'm not comfortable putting a number on it until such time as we get a little further down the pathway.
When you just mentioned all the various town department connections, do you think it would make sense, not at this moment, but just to keep in mind that there might be one town employee who is kind of the liaison from the committee to the health, the police,
Yes.
Because there's not all those people are going to be able to attend every
Correct.
meeting. So,
Correct. That's a very good suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned the past year or two with a number of issues that have popped up as divisive in the community, and each one of those, the issue of having a long-range overall plan is what's driving this. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, it's, rather than having an issue and sides being taken on that issue,
Right.
you know, we gotta look at it in a bigger context, and
Right, I
that's
think-
why I think this makes sense.
Yeah, one of the best ways it was described to me was, it's whack-a-mole. An issue rises over here, we gotta deal with
Yeah.
that, we hit the, okay, there's one over here. But if we can somehow cohesively.
And vet
look at
them
all-
before they get to the point of, you know, funding and that type of thing.
Right, and you know, here's, the reality is, we're not gonna make everybody happy. There are gonna be some decisions that come out of this task force that are not gonna meet with the full acceptance of, you know, many of our friends and neighbors. But on the other hand, we're hoping that many of those recommendations do meet with the acceptance and in general acceptance townwide, so.
Okay, so what do you need, a
I
motion
just
to
need you,
establish
yeah,
this?
yeah, to establish the
So
committee. Thank you.
Tracy, make it work.
I'll second it.
Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Abstain, recusals, hearing none, motion carried. Thank you very much for those couple of items. I greatly appreciate it.
Matt, did we miss this year-end transfer for debt revaluation? Or
we did.
was I just in
All right. Good point, good catch. Where is it?
number 3? No, number 5.
Maybe that's me.
Where's the numbering's confusing.
Yeah, the numbering scheme is a bit
Yeah.
confusing, so.
Because there's numbers within numbers.
Yes. So I guess 5.3.
It's 5.3.
Oh, we went from salaries to
Ah, yes, we
technology,
jumped
yeah.
in.
Yeah,
missed one of mine.
we did.
Come on back up.
I was gonna wait.
All right, we need to consider and take possible action on 2017-18 budget transfers as outlined by the finance director in her year-end transfers. And we, go ahead.
These are items we've talked about at meetings. I've noted that both of these line items are going over because we had funding in place from our fund balance to cover those.
Right.
It's our debt, which we used over $735,000 of money we had set aside from debt premiums and other savings. And also for revaluation, we have a balance left on the contract. So we're transferring over $40,408 from reval. You found the page?
I did.
What page number?
Page 45.
It could have been 52 the year before.
Right.
So I'm looking for, now that we're almost at the end of our fiscal year and have a pretty good handle on what these numbers would be, I'm looking for a request to transfer the funds as stated.
Good. Is there a motion to make the, waive the reading of the?
She looked like she's,
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Is there a motion?
move it.
Second.
And the motion is to make the transfers
Transfer.
as detailed in Mary Jane's memo. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Now you can go.
Yeah, I was gonna wait to the end.
Item 9, discuss and take possible action to set the annual town meeting for Monday, May 7th at 7 PM at the Guilford Town Hall.
It's actually supposed to be May 14th.
It's May 14th,
Yeah.
so it is May 14th
Yep.
now. Okay? This is our annual rite of passage under the charter. And the interesting part about this, some have heard me say this before, were we to have a wildly successful annual town meeting with 10% of the electors.
10%, 10 people you mean.
10% of of the eligible electors, we wouldn't have a room big enough to hold it in.
That would be up to 1,500 people.
Right. So is there a motion to set it for the?
So moved.
Second, Charlie?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, motion carries. Item 10, 10.1 is act on recommendation to appoint Amy Earls to the Human Services Council. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, recusal, none, hearing none. Congratulations, Amy, you're now on the Human Services Council. 10.2, act on resignation received from Paul May from the Conservation Inland Wetlands Commission. Is there a motion to do so with regret and gratitude?
Yes, very much so.
And second?
Second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, Hearing none, motion carries. All right, let's get into requests for use of town property.
I think these, we could do the one motion thing.
Can we do the one motion, Charlie?
Yes.
All right.
This is Gary's tradition. We have
Gary's
to get it
tradition,
cranking, yeah.
since Gary was, made this meeting a little longer because of his presentation today, we can
That's
do
right.
that.
And
All right,
I'll
there-
move we approve the uses of the green as spelled out in the application.
And there, wonderful, and there are nine.
If there are uses, are the signs and use of the green.
Wonderful. Is there a second?
Second.
Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing
For the
none.
public who might want to note that it's June 22nd for graduation.
Uh-huh.
Unless it keeps snowing.
No,
Okay.
I was listening to the Board of Ed meeting. The graduation is that date. The school may continue after that,
Right,
but graduation is that date at this point in time.
wonderful. Okay. Item 12, building officials monthly report. Any comments or questions on that? Any on Public Works monthly report? None. Committee
No, no.
reports. Self-nominate at your earliest convenience.
Nobody's,
We don't want the Army volunteer system. Actually, you know what I'll do is I'll put together a list of the ones that I think we need
That would be
liaisons
I
to.
would
Is
appreciate that,
is
yes,
okay?
that's a very good idea.
And then we'll,
Yeah.
then we'll, throw dice or whatever we have to do,
Okay.
or, rock, scissors, paper, whatever it is. Okay, old business. Anybody have anything under old business? How about new business? None? Public forum. Anyone wishing to address the board on any issue, welcome to do so. Come on up, state name and address for the record, and share with us your thoughts.
Hello.
Good morning. Yeah,
Good
right there's
morning.
fine.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate your time. My name is Dr. David Young. I'm a resident, a longtime resident of Guilford, represented by probably over 10 people here, both from the high school and residents. On behalf of Simon, who's our dog, back in August, our dog was being watched by our sitter in the yard, and he was, a teenager from next door came across our fence with a lacrosse stick, appeared to threaten harm, although he may have not meant it, but startled the sitter, startled the dog. The dog bit him in the ankle a little bit to kind of ward him off. He raised the stick rather than run. The dog bit him in the leg. Simon was quarantined at the police department. We were not given a choice to quarantine him on property, which we should have been given a choice according to the law.
I just want to
and-
interrupt for 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
please.
sorry. And just for the general knowledge of the public.
Yes.
This is a matter of ongoing litigation, so there should be really no comments from the board on
Right.
any of this.
Yeah, we're gonna do that.
So Simon has no history of harming another person. He stays on our yard. When he goes off, he's in a harness with us. We walk him. We've had him since 2011. He was adopted from the Humane Society in Branford in 2011. We've had him for that. All my children have grown up with him. Simon is clearly protected by the Connecticut State Statute 22-357, which states an owner is not liable for damages, or the dog, if the person was on the property, the dog was on his own property, the person who was injured was committing trespass or other tort, such as a wrongful act of infringement, teasing, tormenting, or abusing the dog. Simon has a history of having things thrown at him from across the fence, sticks, rocks, etc., in the past, but Simon was on his own property. So at the time, the teenager chanted, kill the dog, and this is on the police report. This is all public record, if anybody wants to look it up. And this was clearly an emotional response, understandable, but should have not had any bearing on the decision to kill Simon. We were reassured in the first 9 pages of the police report, we were reassured that Simon did nothing wrong, he was on his own property, he'd be brought home. We were repeatedly reassured this. And then one day, apparently there was a private meeting with the neighbors who insisted that Simon be put down. It was at this meeting that the decision was to euthanize Simon. And this kind of broadsided my wife and I and my kids. Despite being reassured that this would not happen, because he was on his own property as protected by law. This meeting is also interesting because it's a violation of the open meeting law. This was, I understand, Selectman Hui, that you inherited this mess, all of you. This was not a decision made by you, I fully understand that. It was a decision made by First Selectman Mazza at the time. It was a wrong decision. It was an inappropriate decision. And, my ask of you is to do the right thing. Level heads I would like to see prevail and do the right thing. The town does not face potential liability if they do not act to kill Simon. It is not based in fact or on similar incidents. There have been multiple dog bite incidents in this town. Most recently, another dog, Gruff, was quarantined for biting an unprovoked bite on his own property. That family was given a choice to quarantine at home or at the facility. And upon release of the dog, the family was offered services of a trainer for aggressive dogs. Simon was not offered any of that. And again, I understand that you inherited this, but as First Selectman, you do have the authority. This decision was made under the watch of Selectman Mazza, but this decision was made by employees of the town and employees of you all. In fact, I said this at the beginning, yes, Simon is protected by not only an electric fence, but also a high fence on the side of where this kid came over. At some point, that fence was cut. There was also a wire fence. But, of course, reasonable actions is I'm willing to put up a larger fence to keep people out. Simon never goes out on his own. So, it would be more to keep people out than him in, because he doesn't go out. And again, that's, my ask of you is to review this with level heads and do the right thing. There is no risk to the town. There's only risk to me if Simon gets out and bites somebody. That's risk to me, not the town. Unfortunately, this meeting that took place, the town capitulated to the special interests of the neighbors who are suing, our property insurance. And, the neighbors coerced the town to change its position to benefit their interests and not of those of the residents that you all serve. In this meeting, there are no minutes. The town attorney was there, the police chief was there.
Excuse me, I have to interrupt. That was not a public meeting. It was not a quorum of the board.
Which is the problem.
I don't want, the first selectman at the time was fully authorized as this selectman to have a private meeting with residents.
Yeah. Well, that'll be litigated. So, but again, at the end of the day, I'm looking for level heads. if you look at case after case after case of a dog biting with no prior history on his own property, these dogs were not euthanized. You know, again, a recent case, there was another case that I know of, 2 bite cases on that person's property. They're well known to this, they're well known to you, they're well known in this town. Both times, the dog was quarantined on their own property and no issues resolved, you know, came up of it. And so, you know, you can't interpret the law as you see fit. It's just not appropriate, and it's not legal. You can't say, we're gonna decide this day, you know, usually we're gonna decide this, but because maybe someone's threatening something, we're gonna decide another way, which is against 22-357. You know, I'd like to, you know, I can give you all this. I have a petition with 8,000 signatures. But I also have multiple letters of support for Simon for people who come on my property frequently. People have never met Simon who come on my property. You know, but it's one thing to come on one's property who, I mean, I think, you know, you're a dog lover. I'm actually, I know your brother. I work with him. And, you know, people come on folks' property all the time. It's the context. If one is perceived to be threatening harm or uninvited, you know, that's a different story, you know. But, you know, I have multiple cases of people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
But if anybody else, I mean, you know, that's kind of what I have. You know, I think there needs to be consistency in the application of how dogs are treated, you know, again, with no history on his own property. Been here for 20 years. All my children grew up with Simon in this community, and I think he has a lot of support, so thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I appreciate it.
Anyone else wishing to address the board? Yes,
You have no comments on all these points this man's made?
I don't. You heard town council indicate that this is a matter of litigation. This board cannot comment on pending litigation matters. Simple. And I'm sorry, I would love to engage in conversations, but at this point, on the advice of council, we cannot discuss pending litigation. That's,
Well, can I just ask one question?
Actually, there is no litigation, though. What litigation? There's no litigation.
Pam?
Yeah, we have hired Lieutenant Ryan, the former town attorney, and he is handling this matter.
So he's charging lots of money for his billable hours, in other words. So,
That's a subjective statement,
Yeah,
but he
it
is
is,
charging,
but it's true.
he is charging traditional labor rates, you're right,
Mhm.
so. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Hearing
Just
none,
for the
I'll entertain a motion.
edification of people, we can't comment today, but can you go through, or Pam, can you go through the way the process,
I really can't at this
What-
stage.
what-
We're in the middle of the process. I know they tried a mediation and it did not, it failed. So,
Mhm.
I can find that out for you.
Would it be appropriate for us, I'm sorry to take up time with this, but would it be appropriate for us to have an executive session at an upcoming meeting to discuss it? I don't know anything about the situation,
that would
but
be appropriate.
it's hard to listen to a citizen come up and bring
I would
this
like
up
to-
without pursuing
yeah,
it,
that was
at
gonna be
least
my
to
next
become
request.
knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Okay,
We'll certainly have an
Thank you.
executive
Session.
session.
Okay.
And the claims.
got it, okay.
We good? Anything further? Nope. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Recused? Yet another motion carried. But, yeah.
You're right, your brother.
No, it was.